Audiobook Top, your new home for the finest selection of audiobooks available anywhere.
Ladies and gentlemen, gather round, if you please. Draw near, and let us delve into a tale not merely of shadows and secrets, but of the very core of what it means to be human. For you see, we all wear faces, don't we? Bright and polished for the world, perhaps, while behind them, well, that's another story entirely. And tonight, we begin with a door. Not just any door, mind you, but *** door unremarkable in its neglect, yet a gateway to a truth far stranger than fiction. Our journey begins, as many good stories do, with habit. Every Sunday, rain or shine, through the bustling heart of London, two gentlemen would embark upon their constitutional walk. There was Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, a man whose very presence suggested an old-fashioned solemnity. Dry as dust, some would say, with a face that rarely betrayed a flicker of emotion, yet beneath that austere exterior beat a heart capable of immense, if quiet, loyalty. He was a man of few words, and those few often directed at himself. His companion, Mr. Richard Enfield, was quite a different sort of well-known man about town, fond of gossip and the brighter side of life, a man who, one might say, had a more expansive view of the world's curiosities. Now, their walks followed a precise, unspoken ritual. They'd stride along, often in comfortable silence, their steps echoing the rhythm of their long-standing friendship. One particular street they frequented was a delight to the eye, clean, charming, a symphony of prosperous houses with bright, welcoming doors and well-tended brass. But then, midway down this very street, like a sour note in a grand melody, stood the door. It belonged to a building, certainly, but it seemed to possess no other entrance. No window broke its bleak expanse, no chimney smoked above it. It was simply a door, black and blistered, scarred and discolored, with a silent air of sinister neglect. All the neighbors' efforts to keep their own facades pristine only served to highlight this singular blot. It was a place, you felt, that offered no invitation, that seemed to hoard its secrets in the dark, dusty corners of its soul. One Sunday, as they passed this very door, Mr. Enfield, quite uncharacteristically, pointed with his cane. Speaking of queer turns, he began, drawing a deep breath. I once had an experience connected to that very door. Mr. Utterson merely grunted, a sound of mild encouragement he reserved for Enfield. You know how it is, sometimes you're walking home very late, and the whole town seems asleep, and then you see something that just sticks with you. Enfield paused, clearly relishing the moment. It was 3 o'clock of a black winter morning, and I was coming home from some place at the end of the world, when I chanced to pass by that door. And there, at the corner, I saw two figures. One was a man, walking at a very fast pace. The other was a little girl, running as hard as she could, coming round the corner. They ran into one another, naturally. And the man, without a word, without so much as a by your leave, simply trampled her underfoot. He didn't stop, mind you. He just kept on going, like some damned juggernaut, grinding her down. A gasp might have escaped your lips. Had you been there. Mr. Utterson, however, remained impassive, his gaze fixed on Enfield's face. Well, Enfield continued, warming to his tale. I gave a bit of a shout, and the man did stop. And out of nowhere, it seemed, a doctor appeared, and the girl's family. It was an almost deserted street, mind you, and yet they sprang up like mushrooms. They were all there, and they were all furious. And I tell you, I've never seen a man I so disliked. There was something about him, some deformity, though I couldn't put my finger on it. A hateful face, a sneering smile. A man to make the very stones cry out in protest. The crowd, he explained, was ready to tear this man limb from limb. The doctor, usually so calm, was as white as a sheet, and the girl's family were weeping and wailing, demanding justice. "We'll make a scandal of this, sir!" they cried. "We'll make sure your name is dragged through the dirt! You'll pay for this!" And the man, this repulsive, nameless brute, he merely stood there, calmly, almost smiling. "If you wish to avoid a scandal," he said, his voice cold, "and collect some money for the girl, then I suggest you name your figure." Enfield's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. And what do you think they named? £100 to be exact. And the man, this creature, agreed without a moment's hesitation. But he had no money on him. So, where do you think he went to fetch it? Enfield paused for dramatic effect. "Why, through that very door, of course!" And what do you think he came out with? A check. A bearer check, mind you. Signed with a name that everyone knew, a highly respectable name. A name that could not possibly be associated with such a wretch. Enfield shook his head, a look of profound bewilderment on his face. "Now, I happen to know the gentleman whose name was on that check. I know his signature, and it was genuine. It was no forgery. But how Utterson? How could a man of such unimpeachable reputation lend his name, his credit, to such a nefarious transaction? My only theory is that the blackmailer, for that's what he must be, held some dreadful secret over the respectable gentleman. Some skeleton in the closet, so dark and foul that it allowed this Hyde for that, I discovered, was the brute's name to command a sum so vast, without question or complaint. He pointed again at the blistered door. Ever since then, whenever I see that door, I think of the story. I think of the two names, the one whispered with contempt, the other spoken with reverence, somehow bound together by that single, dark portal. Mr. Utterson remained silent for a long moment, his gaze now fixed on the door, a flicker of something unreadable in his deep-set eyes. He absorbed every detail, every chilling implication. He had, of course, heard the name Hyde before, but it had merely been a name, a rumor on the wind. Now it had a face, a story, a connection to a man he knew, a man he respected. And here, my friends, is where our chapter truly takes root. For what Enfield unwittingly stumbled upon was not just a strange anecdote, but a vivid illustration of the very theme that pulses through this tale, the two faces we all wear. The face we present to the world, respectable, virtuous, predictable, and the other face, the one we hide away, the one we indulge in secret, perhaps in the dead of night, behind a neglected door, in a forgotten part of ourselves. We like to believe we are whole, unified beings. But what if, within the most upright of us, there lurks a darker impulse? What if our perfectly constructed lives are but a thin veneer, easily shattered by a single ugly deed, a single unacknowledged desire? The respectable gentleman and the trampling brute, how could they be connected? What unspeakable bond tied the two together, linking a name of honor to a deed of infamy? Mr. Utterson, after much thought, merely cleared his throat. "Are you sure it was a check?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. Enfield nodded, firm. "Aye, Utterson, a check it was." And with that, the two men continued their walk, their comfortable silence now imbued with a new, unsettling weight. For the lawyer, the tale of the door and the name it concealed had opened a crack in his world. A glimpse into a potential truth so disturbing, so contrary to his orderly universe, that he could only carry it in his heart. A seed of unease that would soon blossom into terror. The door stood silently behind them, holding its breath, waiting for the true story of the two faces to unfold. My dear reader, draw close, if you will, and let us, for a moment, cast aside the bustling din of the world outside, the urgent claims of the present hour, and turn our gaze inward. For what is a book truly, but a looking glass held up to the intricate workings of the human spirit? And what finer subject could there be than the very architecture of our being, the chambers and passages of the soul itself? We begin, not with a flourish of trumpets nor the rumble of an approaching carriage, but with a whisper, a question that has haunted philosophers and poets since time immemorial. Who are we, truly? Are we the singular, immutable edifice we present to the world, the upright citizen, the loving parent, the diligent professional? Or are we, in truth, a fractured entity, a composite of competing desires, a masquerade of selves parading beneath the fixed stars of society's watchful eye? Consider, if you would, the morning mirror. We present a face, perhaps weary from a troubled night, perhaps resolute for the day ahead. But behind those eyes, beneath that carefully constructed facade, does there not lurk another? A wilder, more impulsive shadow, yearning to break free from the shackles of propriety, to dance unburdened by consequence. Aye, even the most virtuous amongst us, those pillars of the community, those paragons of moral rectitude, are not immune to this ancient, internal wrestling match. It is a curious paradox, is it not? This duality, this constant tension between the angel and the devil perched upon our shoulders, each whispering their persuasive truths. We cultivate the virtues kindness, honesty, charity with the meticulous care of a gardener tending his prized roses, pruning away the errant branches, protecting them from blight. And yet, deep within the fertile soil of our subconscious, there sprouts another growth entirely. A darker, more tenacious vine, nourished by forbidden impulses, by the urge to transgress, to experience the raw, untamed essence of living, divorced from the inconvenient strictures of conscience. Where does this shadow self reside? In the hushed hours of the night, perhaps, when the world sleeps and our defenses falter. In the fleeting thought, the momentary resentment, the flicker of temptation that darts across the mind before being swiftly banished. We are masters of suppression, are we not? We build walls, not around our cities, but around our souls, containing those darker urges, convincing ourselves that by simply locking them away, they cease to exist. But does a caged beast truly disappear? Or does it merely pace, ever more fiercely, behind its bars, its hunger growing, its strength accumulating, awaiting the moment of its liberation. And what if, my friends, what if there were a way to unlock that cage entirely? To give form and freedom to that suppressed, that primitive, that utterly selfish part of ourselves, while simultaneously preserving the reputation, the dignity, the very soul of the man we wish the world to see. This, then, is the perilous question at the heart of our tale. It is a story not merely of a singular individual, but of humanity itself. For Dr. Jekyll, whose strange case we are about to unfold, is not an anomaly, but rather a magnification, a living allegory of the battles waged within each of us. He is a man who dared to venture where others only dream into the uncharted territories of the self, attempting to dissect and separate the interwoven strands of good and evil that compose our very essence. What he discovers, what he unleashes, and what torments him will serve as a chilling testament to the formidable power of those forces we so readily dismiss or deny. It is a journey into the heart of ambition, the seductive lure of freedom from responsibility, and the terrifying consequences of tampering with the delicate balance of the human soul. So, prepare yourselves, dear readers, for we are about to embark upon an exploration not merely of a London physician and his monstrous secret, but into the hidden depths of our own desires, our own capacities for both darkness and light. We shall witness, through his eyes, the profound truth that to divide the self is not to conquer it, but perhaps to utterly destroy it. The stage is set, the curtain is about to rise, and the subject, as ever, is the eternal struggle for the soul of man. Setting a quiet Sunday afternoon in Victorian London. The air is crisp, the gas lamps are not yet lit. The scene opens on two gentlemen walking at a leisurely pace, their canes tapping softly on the pavement. Our tale begins, as so many do, with a ritual. Every Sunday, Mr. Utterson, a lawyer of unshakable repute and severe countenance, would walk with his kinsman, Mr. Richard Enfield. Their friendship, a curious thing, was built not on effusive conversation, but the quiet comfort of shared silence. They rarely spoke, understanding each other in the unspoken. On this particular Sunday, their footsteps led them down a familiar thoroughfare in London, a street of prosperous respectability. Polished brass, freshly scrubbed doorsteps, it spoke of comfortable lives within. Yet, as they rounded a particular corner, their gazes invariably snagged upon an incongruous sight. Nestled amongst cheerful neighbors stood a two-story building with no window on the ground floor. But it was the door below that truly repelled, a door of singular ugliness, utterly lacking care, no bell or knocker. The black paint had long since peeled and blistered, revealing raw, unkempt wood. Schoolboys carved initials into its panels, struck matches against its grimy surface. It bore the marks of years of neglect, of wanton abuse, a silent defiance against the pleasant world. It was, in short, a blot upon the street, an anomaly that always seemed to draw Enfield's eye, and often, his tongue. "Did you ever remark that door?" Enfield asked, breaking a customary silence, his cane pointing instinctively towards the portal. Utterson grunted, listening. "It is connected in my mind with a very odd story," Enfield continued, warming to his subject. "A pretty bad story, too. Not for a man of the cloth, perhaps, but certainly one for a man of the law, like yourself, Utterson." Utterson merely urged him on with another, deeper grunt, his eyes fixed on the door with sudden, keen interest. "Well, it was like this," Enfield began, settling into rhythm. "I was coming home one night, 3 o'clock of a black winter morning, gas lamps still burning brightly in the fog. Streets empty. And as I drew near this corner, a man came running around it from one end, and at the same time, a little girl running from another cross street. The two met at the corner. The man trampled calmly over the child and left her screaming on the ground. It sounds nothing, I know, but it was hellish to see. It wasn't like a man, it was like some damned juggernaut." Enfield shivered slightly, recalling the chill of that winter night and the man's inhumanity. "I gave a view halloa, of course," he went on, and started running. Next minute, I had him by the collar. The child's family, having heard her screams, were out and around us like angry bees. And the physician, too, for she'd fallen by his door. We were all there, and the man was quite cool and collected, no fear, no remorse, just a black, displeasing something in his face. I swear, Utterson, I never saw a man I so disliked, yet I scarce know why. Something wrong with his appearance, something displeasing, downright detestable. Never one that gave me such a strong feeling of pure loathing at first sight." Utterson listened, impassive, but a flicker of comprehension crossed his eyes. "We surrounded him, of course," Enfield continued. "Women crying, child in hysterics, the doctor shaking his head. We told him we'd make a scandal. His name would stink from one end of London to the other. And the fellow, quite unmoved, said, "If you choose to make a scandal, I shall give you my address." So self-possessed, so utterly devoid of human emotion, it took us aback. We demanded amends, compensation, for the outrage, the sheer villainy. And the fellow, he just smiled, a twisted, ugly thing, and said he had no money. Enfield took a deep breath. But the women, Utterson, they were like harpies. They swore they'd make him a laughing stock. And the doctor quietly informed the man he had no option but to pay. So, finally, the man agreed. But only if we gave him a chance to go in and fetch the money. And where do you suppose he went to fetch it from? Enfield paused, allowing the question to hang, before pointing his cane once more at the shabby, neglected door. He went in here, Utterson. In that asterisk door. And what do you think he brought out? Not cash, no, but a check. A check for £100, drawn upon Couts's, and signed with a name that I cannot mention, though I dare say you would know it as well as I do, and perhaps better. Utterson's eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle shift indicating a mind suddenly engaged. £100 to settle a trampled child case, Enfield mused. And the person who signed it was a gentleman of the highest respectability. One of those who keeps an unblemished name, very loth to see it splashed across a newspaper, connected to such a sordid affair. We were all convinced, Utterson, that the man we had just apprehended, this creature of the night, was holding some sway over the signatory. Blackmail, we whispered. How else could a man of such standing allow his name to be used for a payment made to quiet such a monstrous deed? And the name? Utterson asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. Enfield looked at him. Now, Utterson, you know my rule. I never ask questions if I can help it. The more it looks like Queer Street, the less I ask. But the check was genuine. I went to the bank myself, just to make sure. And the fellow walked off with his head held high. They walked on in silence, their usual quiet now imbued with a new, heavier quality. Utterson's mind, a meticulous instrument, was sifting through details connecting faint threads. He prized order and reputation. This tale, this door, this unknown man and the known name connected to him, presented an unsettling anomaly. And you don't know the name? Utterson pressed, unable to quite let it go. Enfield sighed, a slight impatience in his tone. I have already told you I do not choose to utter it. What's more, I never saw the man again. And to tell you the truth, I'm rather glad of it. He left such an impression of deformity, of something innately evil, that I have no wish to ever encounter his like again. There is something wrong with his appearance, something displeasing, downright detestable. I've never seen a man that so distorts the very air about him. Utterson said nothing more. But as their walk continued, his eyes kept straying back to that dark, blighted door, standing like a leper amidst its healthy neighbors. The story had resonated with him in a way Enfield could not have understood, for Utterson knew the name. He knew the man who had signed that check, a man of science, of charity, whose reputation was as spotless as newly fallen snow. And the thought of that respected name, that revered friend, connected to such an act of casual brutality, and to such a sinister, unknown agent, began to gnaw at him. The casual conversation of a Sunday stroll had, in one instant, cracked the facade of his world. Through that door of disrepute, as he was already beginning to think of it, peered something monstrous, profoundly disturbing. Utterson, a man who habitually repressed curiosity, found himself, for the first time in a very long while, profoundly, unsettlingly curious. The seeds of a terrible investigation had been sown, not in legal documents, but in the grime and decay of a neglected door on a respectable London street. The walk continued, but the world, for Mr. Utterson, had subtly, irrevocably shifted. The door had been opened, and a sense of foreboding settled upon him, thick and palpable as a London fog. The cobblestones of the sleeping city offered little comfort beneath Mr. Utterson's measured tread that Sunday. The tale his kinsman, Mr. Enfield, had spun just yesterday, a simple anecdote born of a chance walk, now clung to him like a clammy fog. It was the tale of the door, the darkened facade, and the monstrous, trampling figure of Mr. Hyde. The very sound of that name, spoken in the hushed intimacy of their Sunday stroll, had taken root in Utterson's mind, a sinister seed blossoming into a chilling obsession. He found himself, quite against his will, retracing his steps. The very notion that this monstrous Hyde should be connected to his old friend, Dr. Jekyll, a man of science, repute, and kindness, gnawed at his lawyer's soul. How could such disparate worlds collide? Yet, Enfield had spoken of a check signed by Jekyll, and a key entrusted to Hyde. The pieces, though few, fit together with an unsettling precision. Utterson's study, usually a sanctuary of order and logic, felt oppressive that evening. The fire in the grate cast dancing shadows that seemed to mock the solid reality of his books. He pulled open the drawer of his private safe, a heavy brass key turning with a click that echoed in the quiet room. There, among the various legal documents of his distinguished clientele, lay a sealed envelope, thick with Dr. Jekyll's familiar script. It was Jekyll's last will and testament, a document that had long troubled Utterson, but which now, with the advent of Mr. Hyde, took on a truly terrifying cast. He broke the seal, his movements precise, almost ritualistic. The parchment crackled as he unfolded it. His gaze fell upon the crucial clause, the one that had always pricked his conscience like a thorn eye. Henry Jekyll, do bequeath all my possessions, present and future, to my friend and benefactor, Edward Hyde, in case of my death or unexplained disappearance for a period exceeding 3 calendar months. The aforementioned Edward Hyde shall forthwith, and without delay, enter into full possession. Utterson reread the lines, his brow furrowed deeper. Disappearance. That was the word that struck him now, like a cold hand on his neck. It was not just death, but disappearance, a grim echo of Enfield's tale, a suggestion of something clandestine, something that skulked in the shadows. His friend, the benevolent Dr. Jekyll, entangled in such an ominous arrangement. It was not right, not natural. A chill snaked down his spine. The lawyer in him sensed foul play. The friend in him felt a profound unease. The next morning, Utterson's resolve was set. He would not rest until he had unraveled this Gordian knot. His first call was to Dr. Jekyll's house. Not to Jekyll himself, for Utterson knew his friend's habits, his reclusive nature. No, he would seek out Mr. Poole, Jekyll's long-serving butler, a man of quiet discretion and unwavering loyalty. The grand facade of Jekyll's house, usually so welcoming, seemed to Utterson's newly suspicious eyes to hold a hint of melancholy, a shadow of secrets. Poole, a tall, pale man, answered the door. "Good morning, Poole," Utterson began, attempting a casual tone that belied his inner turmoil. "Is Dr. Jekyll within?" "Indeed, Mr. Utterson, but he is in his laboratory, as is his custom. He bids me say he is not receiving visitors today." Utterson nodded, feigning understanding. "I see. And Mr. Hyde, is he often here?" Poole's face, usually impassive, twitched almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Hyde, sir? Yes, he is. Not so much in the front house, mind you. But he has a key, you see. He comes and goes through the laboratory door, that one in the court. It's quite irregular, if I may say so, sir, and Dr. Jekyll has given the servants strict orders to obey Mr. Hyde." Utterson's heart sank further. So it was true. Hyde had free rein, a shadowy presence with a direct link to Jekyll's inner sanctum. "And what sort of man is he, Poole?" "This Mr. Hyde." Poole hesitated, his gaze shifting uneasily. "He's not a man I care for, sir. No, nor do any of us. He gives us orders, sharp and quick, never a civil word. And a strange walk he has, sir. More like a cat than a man. And there's something about him, something that turns the stomach." Poole's description, though vague, resonated with Enfield's account. It amplified Utterson's growing dread. He departed, his mind racing. The compulsion to know, that deep unsettling urge, now took firm hold. He had to see Hyde for himself. He had to understand what monstrous connection bound his dear friend. For days, Utterson haunted the street where Enfield had first encountered the nefarious Hyde. He rose early, braved the evening fogs, pacing the secluded alleyway that led to the mysterious laboratory door. It was a grimy, forgotten corner of London, far removed from Jekyll's respectable front entrance, a fitting lair for a creature of the night. He felt a rising sense of trepidation with each passing hour, a morbid fascination drawing him into the labyrinth of this secret. He knew not what he expected, but the very thought of encountering this phantom filled him with a chilling excitement. At last, one evening, as the lamps flickered on and a shroud of mist began to descend, a small figure appeared in the alley. It moved with a peculiar, shuffling gait, pausing at the very door Utterson had come to know so intimately. This, Utterson knew instinctively, was Hyde. Utterson felt a sudden surge of something akin to revulsion, a primal instinct screaming alarm. The man was small, to be sure, but his presence was immense, radiating an aura of malevolence that seemed to deform the very air around him. There was nothing overtly ugly about his features, yet Utterson felt an uncontrollable loathing, a shudder of disgust. It was as if some fundamental human aversion to evil had been physically manifested. Gathering his courage, Utterson stepped forward. "Mr. Hyde, I believe," he called out, his voice surprisingly steady. Hyde, startled, turned sharply. His face, though unreadable, held a flicker of something venomous. His gaze, Utterson noted, was cold, devoid of warmth or empathy. "That is my name. What do you want?" His voice was hoarse, a whisper that seemed to scratch the very air. "I am Mr. Utterson, a lawyer," he began, trying to project an air of professional calm, "and an old friend of Dr. Jekyll's." Hyde's eyes narrowed, a hint of disdain flickering in their depths. "He is not at home," he snapped. "What do you want?" "I thought I would introduce myself," Utterson pressed on, refusing to be intimidated. "I understand you have some business with Dr. Jekyll." He paused, then, feeling a surge of daring, added, "Perhaps you would indulge me with your address." Hyde gave a short, guttural laugh, a sound that grated on Utterson's ears. "Why should I?" he sneered. Then, as if a sudden impulse had taken hold, he rattled off an address in a distant, squalid part of Soho. "Now are you satisfied, and may I ask, how did you know me?" Utterson chose his words carefully. "By description, Dr. Jekyll has spoken of you." It was a lie, of course, but a necessary one. He wanted to see Hyde's reaction. A snarl twisted Hyde's lips. "He never told you my address, did he?" He hissed, a triumphant malice in his voice. "He never told you a thing. I thought as much." With that, he fumbled with his key, unlocked the door, and slipped inside, vanishing as abruptly as he had appeared. Utterson stood alone in the dark alley, the memory of Hyde's face, his voice, his chilling presence burning into his mind. The feeling of revulsion was overwhelming, yet the lawyer's compulsion was far from satisfied. The mystery had only deepened. His next destination was Dr. Lanyon's house. Lanyon, another old friend of Jekyll's, a bluff, hearty man, usually a fount of good cheer, now seemed the only logical person to turn to. Perhaps he held some clue, some insight into Jekyll's recent, peculiar behavior. Lanyon greeted Utterson with his customary warmth, though his boisterous laugh seemed to crack around the edges of a recent bitterness. They settled into Lanyon's study, a room dominated by scientific apparatus and the comforting scent of chemicals. "Henry Jekyll has been a recluse of late," Utterson began, coming straight to the point. "And I've encountered a strange tale, Lanyon, about a Mr. Hyde connected to him. Do you know anything of this man?" Lanyon's jovial expression hardened. "Hyde? No, never heard of the fellow. But as for Henry, well, Utterson, between ourselves, he's become a changed man. Quite lost his head, I fear. We fell out, you know, years ago, over science. He started indulging in some unscientific balderdash, some fanciful, transcendental nonsense. Utterly abhorrent, Utterson, pure scientific heresy. I told him as much to his face, and we've seen little of each other since. He always was too fanciful for a true man of science, but now he's gone beyond the pale." Lanyon, in his righteous indignation, offered no direct knowledge of Hyde, but his words painted a clearer picture of Jekyll's recent intellectual isolation, his retreat into esoteric studies. It suggested a man capable of strange fixations, of straying down perilous paths. Utterson left Lanyon's house with a heavy heart. The city seemed to close in around him, its familiar streets now imbued with an air of lurking menace. Hyde, with his nameless deformity, his cold malice, and his inexplicable connection to Jekyll, filled Utterson's thoughts. He understood Lanyon's dismissal of Jekyll's unscientific balderdash only too well now. What dreadful, secret experiment could have birthed such a monstrous associate? That night, sleep offered no escape. Utterson tossed and turned, haunted by a recurring nightmare. He saw Hyde, always Hyde, stealing through the quiet streets, trampling a child, dissolving into mist, and then, inexplicably, changing faces in the very act of disappearance. Sometimes Hyde had no face at all, a featureless terror that chilled him to the bone. Other times the face, though distinct, eluded his grasp, leaving only a memory of utter malevolence. The lawyer's rational mind struggled against this tide of horror. He knew he was standing at the precipice of a terrible revelation. His compulsion to know, once a mere professional curiosity, had transformed into a relentless, personal quest, fraught with a growing sense of dread. He felt a profound sense of responsibility for his friend, and an equally profound fear of the truth. The mystery of Jekyll and Hyde, a knot of darkness and fear, had begun to consume him, pulling him ever deeper into its chilling embrace. He was utterly compelled to unravel it, no matter the cost, no matter the terror it might unleash. The gas lamps of Cavendish Square cast their dim, shivering halos upon the wet cobblestones as Mr. Utterson, solicitor, turned into the familiar, dignified street. His stride, typically so firm and unyielding, held a fractional hesitation tonight, a shadow of the disquiet that had clung to him since his last encounter with Mr. Hyde. He stood before the tall, respectable front door of Dr. Henry Jekyll's house, a residence that, with its air of solid prosperity and well-tended decorum, seemed to embody the very essence of the distinguished physician himself. He knocked, and after a moment, the door was opened by Poole, Jekyll's butler, whose face was a study in grave propriety. "Good evening, Poole," Utterson murmured, stepping into the warm, silent hall. "Is the doctor at home?" "Indeed, Mr. Utterson. He is in the laboratory, but I believe he expects you." Poole's voice was as smooth and polished as the dark wood paneling surrounding them. He relieved Utterson of his hat and cane, then ushered him into a spacious, fire-lit room that Jekyll used as his study. Bookshelves lined the walls, heavy with leather-bound volumes, and a scent of old paper and fine tobacco hung pleasantly in the air. Everything here spoke of intellect, refinement, and an impeccable adherence to the gentleman's code. It was a space that perfectly complemented the public image of Dr. Henry Jekyll. Utterson settled into an armchair, the silence of the house pressing in, amplifying his unspoken anxieties. He reflected on his friend, a man whose reputation was as unblemished as his own. How could such a man be tangled with a creature like Hyde? The very thought was an affront to reason, a smudge on the immaculate canvas of Jekyll's life. A light, quick steps sounded in the hall, and then the door opened. Dr. Jekyll entered, and the room seemed to brighten with his presence. He was a man of 50, tall and handsome, with a smooth face that wore an expression of shrewdness and geniality. His movements were fluid, his smile easy, his eyes quick to meet Utterson's. He extended a hand firm and warm, utterly devoid of the cold, clammy touch Utterson associated with Hyde. "Utterson, my dear fellow, to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" Jekyll's voice was rich, melodious, tinged with an almost theatrical charm. He carried himself with an air of profound contentment, a man entirely at ease with himself and the world. Tonight, the very air around him seemed to hum with his vibrant energy. "Henry," Utterson replied, his own tone more subdued, "I have been troubled by certain matters, and thought it best to speak with you directly." Jekyll's smile remained fixed, though his head tilted ever so slightly. "Troubled? My dear Utterson, what could possibly trouble a man of your unflappable composure?" He chuckled, a sound that seemed to chase away the lingering shadows in the room. He seated himself opposite Utterson, leaning forward with an engaging sincerity. "It concerns your will, Henry," Utterson began, carefully. The peculiar clause regarding Mr. Hyde. A subtle shift in Jekyll's demeanor, almost imperceptible. The jovial light in his eyes seemed to dim for a fleeting second, quickly replaced by an expression of mild annoyance, albeit one softened by his usual grace. "Ah, yes, that tiresome business. I had hoped you might have forgotten it." "A mere eccentricity, my good friend, nothing more." "Eccentricity, perhaps," Utterson persisted gently, "but a dangerous one. I have had occasion to observe Mr. Hyde, and I confess, Henry, the man evokes in me a profound sense of evil. A chill, a revulsion I cannot explain." Jekyll waved a dismissive hand, a gesture of elegant impatience. "My dear Utterson, you are too much the man of law, too little the man of charity. You judge too harshly. Hyde is a peculiar case, certainly, but I assure you I have him completely under my control. Utterly so. I can remove him at any moment I choose." His voice carried an edge of conviction, almost an oath. Utterson studied his friend, searching for a tell, a crack in the carefully constructed facade. Jekyll's face remained smooth, his gaze unwavering, yet there was a tension in the set of his jaw, a fractional tightness around the eyes that spoke of something held fiercely in check. He was a performer, giving the performance of his life, one designed to soothe and deflect. Then why this will, Henry? Why such an extraordinary provision for a man so loathsome? Utterson pressed, though he knew he trod on thin ice. Jekyll leaned back, a sigh escaping his lips, a carefully modulated expression of weariness crossing his features. "My dear Utterson, you are a loyal friend, and I appreciate your concern, truly, but this is a matter of profound personal sensitivity. A difficulty, you might say, that touches upon the very core of my being. I cannot explain it, not now, perhaps not ever. But I give you my word, my honor as a gentleman and a physician, that all is well, there is no danger. Indeed, the moment I choose, Hyde will vanish from my life entirely." He paused, then added, his voice dropping to a softer, more confiding tone, "You must simply have faith in me, Utterson. Trust your old friend. I am not mad, nor am I so blind as to fall into the clutches of a villain. This is a private arrangement, a matter of conscience, if you will. I beg of you, let it rest. It causes me pain to speak of it, and your worries, while born of kindness, only deepen the distress." Jekyll's plea was masterfully delivered. His eyes, though still carefully guarded, now held a glint of genuine appeal, almost a hint of vulnerability. It was a well-honed weapon, designed to disarm and elicit sympathy. Utterson, ever the gentleman, found his resolve wavering in the face of such carefully crafted distress. He was being asked to respect a confidence, to trust in a friendship that stretched back decades. "Very well, Henry," Utterson said, a note of resignation in his voice. "If you say you are master of the situation, I must believe you. But know this: should you ever need me, should Hyde ever gain an undue advantage, I am here." Jekyll rose, his smile returning, wider and more radiant than before, as if a great weight had been lifted. He clapped Utterson on the shoulder with a hearty, reassuring thump. "My good Utterson, always the steadfast friend, worry not, my dear fellow. There is no cause for alarm. I am quite at ease. Indeed, I feel more in control than ever before." He laughed then, a rich, robust sound that filled the room, though to Utterson's keen ear, it seemed to carry a fractional note of strain, a hint of something just a shade too loud. Utterson, though outwardly reassured, left Jekyll's grand house with an ache of dissatisfaction. He had encountered a performance, a brilliant display of social grace and determined confidence, but he had not touched the truth. He had seen the immaculate, respectable mask of Dr. Jekyll, a mask polished to a brilliant sheen, and under its unwavering gaze, he had been gently, expertly turned away. The mystery of Hyde remained, a dark, unsettling presence lurking just beneath the surface of his friend's carefully constructed world, a secret the good doctor was determined to keep buried, no matter the cost. And as Utterson walked away, the night's chill seemed to deepen, whispering of secrets and the immense, terrifying effort it took to keep them hidden. A year, they say, can heal all wounds, or at least stitch them up with a convincing thread of normalcy. For a time it seemed London, and indeed Dr. Henry Jekyll, had settled back into a reassuring rhythm. The bizarre incident of the will, the shadowy Mr. Hyde, they had faded. Like a bad dream, upon waking, Dr. Jekyll resumed his philanthropic pursuits, his dinner parties, his reputation gleaming brighter than ever, polished by the absence of that troublesome associate. Utterson, the lawyer, breathed a quiet sigh of relief, often seeing Jekyll in the respectable chambers of his club, and finding him, if anything, more outgoing, more genial than before. The world, it seemed, had righted itself. But beneath the surface, a festering truth lay coiled, ready to strike. One October night, under a sky choked with a low, dun fog that seemed to absorb the very lamplight, painting the streets in smudged sepia, a different kind of drama unfolded. A maid, a creature of sentiment and tender years, had been roused from her sleep, not by a nightmare, but by the exquisite clarity of a full moon slicing through the vapor. She drew back her curtain, her heart fluttering with the simple romance of the hour, gazing out upon the quiet street. Her attention was drawn to two figures beneath the window. One was an elderly gentleman, of singular grace and beauty, with white hair and a gentle, sweet dignity about him, leaning on a cane, speaking to another man. The second man, she noted, was shorter, and seemed to shrink even further as he listened, fidgeting with a heavy cane he carried. The older man, she believed, was Sir Danvers Care, a member of Parliament, a name whispered with reverence in the highest circles. What happened next, she would replay in her mind 1,000 times, each frame burned into her memory with horrifying clarity. The shorter man, without a word, without a moment's hesitation, seemed to erupt. It was an ape-like fury, a sudden, inexplicable paroxysm of pure, unadulterated evil. He lifted his cane, a stout piece of timber, silver-mounted, a familiar sight to the maid, for she'd seen it before in the hand of a certain unspeakable individual, and brought it down upon the unsuspecting Sir Danvers. Again and again, the blows rained down with a horrifying, sickening thud. Sir Danvers fell, a crumpled heap, his cane skittering away, his elegant hat rolling into the gutter. The assailant, utterly spent in his frenzied attack, seemed to calm, then simply turned and fled, leaving a scene of grotesque stillness. The maid, witnessing this horror, felt her senses swim, and she fainted, her romantic reverie shattered, her innocence irrevocably lost. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when the police arrived. A patrol, on their rounds, had stumbled upon the lifeless body of Sir Danvers Care, lying in the street, battered beyond recognition, a broken silver-mounted cane beside him. And then, a small detail, seemingly insignificant, yet destined to unravel a carefully constructed lie, a sealed envelope was found upon the deceased, addressed to Mr. G.J. Utterson, Esquire of Lincoln's Inn. The news reached Utterson with the dawn, delivered by a solemn police inspector. The lawyer, still bleary-eyed, received the inspector in his study. The gravity of the officer's demeanor, the stark facts of the case were enough to rouse him fully. He listened, his brow furrowed, to the grim account. Then, the inspector produced the broken cane. A chill, colder than the morning air, snaked its way down Utterson's spine. He knew that cane. He had given it to Henry Jekyll years ago. A sudden, terrifying certainty gripped him. "I recognize that stick," he said, his voice a low tremor. "It belongs to Dr. Henry Jekyll." The inspector's eyes, keen and analytical, sharpened. "And the assailant, sir, do you have any idea?" Utterson hesitated, then swallowed hard. "I think I do." I believe it is a man called Hyde. The game, Utterson realized with a sickening lurch, was over. The private monstrosity had burst into the public sphere, crimson and undeniable. The carefully erected wall of secrecy, the protective cloak Jekyll had thrown around his dark companion, was now torn to shreds. Without further ado, Utterson found himself accompanying the police inspector on a ghastly tour. Their first stop was Hyde's lodgings in Soho. The air grew heavier, the fog thicker, as they approached that ill-omened district. Soho, even in the wan light of day, seemed a place of shadowed doorways and furtive glances, a stark contrast to the respectable streets Jekyll inhabited. Hyde's house, when they reached it, presented a peculiar anomaly. It was a well-appointed house, boasting a certain luxury in its furnishings, a stark contrast to the squalor surrounding it. Yet, the air within was one of recent disturbance, of hasty retreat. The front door stood ajar, as if its occupant had fled in a desperate hurry. A smooth-tongued old woman, a housekeeper of dubious character, answered their knock. She had a face that spoke of avarice and cunning, a cruel smile etched around her lips. When questioned, she claimed Mr. Hyde had been home very late, but had left again an hour ago, in a great hurry, having received a letter. She was uncooperative, evasive, and seemed, to Utterson, entirely too gleeful at the prospect of her master's downfall. A purse of gold, however, loosened her tongue, albeit only enough to admit that Hyde was prone to extended absences. The police, with Utterson's permission, began their search. They found clothes scattered about the room, a clear sign of hurried packing. But it was Utterson who, with a growing sense of dread, noticed a small pile of ashes in the hearth. He stooped, probing with the poker, and there, amongst the charred remnants, he found a green checkbook, almost entirely consumed by fire, and the splintered end of a heavy, silver-mounted cane, the other half of the weapon that had murdered Sir Danvers' care. The evidence was irrefutable, damning. Hyde was the killer, and the connection to Jekyll through the cane was now a physical, tangible thread, impossible to sever. Utterson stood amidst the wreckage of Hyde's temporary abode, the scent of stale cigar smoke and burnt paper mingling with the chilling reality of murder. The fog, still clinging to the windows, seemed to press in, mirroring the oppressive weight on his soul. It was no longer a question of reputation, or a strange friendship, or a peculiar will. This was murder, cold-blooded and brutal, perpetrated with Jekyll's own stick. Hyde was no longer a secret, a dark indulgence. He was a monster, unleashed upon London, his violent depravity now irrevocably linked to the respectable Dr. Jekyll. There was no going back, no way to unring this bell. The point of no return had been violently, grotesquely crossed, and Utterson, the quiet lawyer, knew with a certainty that turned his blood to ice, that Henry Jekyll was now ensnared, perhaps beyond redemption, in a web of his own terrifying making. The real horror, he suspected, had only just begun. Askrik Pulesht voice hushed, almost a whisper. He is in his cabinet, sir. He has seen no one since the news. But for you, Mr. Utterson, I believe he will make an exception. He asks to be left alone, though, sir. No servants near the door. Shrek Utterson check a nod. His jaw tight. Thank you, Poole. This is a dark business indeed. Stretched Jack out, looking up, voice hoarse. Strained Utterson, my dear friend. You come at a black hour. Asked Utterson, moving closer, but keeping a respectful distance. Henry, my poor fellow. I came as soon as I heard this dreadful news about Sir Danvers' care. The police have been thorough. Shush Jecklishka shudder runs through him. Dreadful. Yes, unspeakable. And to think that. Shishish Jeksk, but there is one ray of light, Utterson. One small comfort in this hellish darkness. He is gone. Askjeks Utterson's frowning, confused. Gone. Who, Henry? Askjekest, his voice gains a desperate edge, a fragile conviction. Hyde. He is gone. For good. I swear it to you, Utterson. I am done with him. Utterly, irrevocably done. This murder, it was the final, damnable blow. I have had a lesson, God knows, a lesson I shall carry to my grave. Ashch utters Sext, staring at Jekyll, trying to decipher the true meaning behind the words. Jekyll's relief seems too fervent, too brittle. You seem relieved, Henry. Yet you are utterly undone. Shecht Jekyll's bitter, mirthless laugh escapes him. Relief. Oh, my friend. The relief of a prisoner released from the gallows, only to find himself chained in a deeper dungeon. The creature is gone, yes, but the shadow he cast, the shame he brought, the burden of his very existence, that, Utterson, is my true prison. This agony, it is my penance. Ashtith Jekyll, I tell you, Utterson, I have had a fright that no man could conceive. From the moment I first laid eyes on that monster, I was enthralled, yet terrified. He had a hold over me, an evil power that grew with every concession, and now this ultimate atrocity. But it has snapped the last tether. I will never, never again look upon his face. I swear it on my soul. Ashk Uttersinsk, his brow furrowed, a chill running down his spine. Jekyll's words about power and concessions sound more like a confession of complicity than victimhood. But what of the police, Henry? What will you say to them? Jekyll's a wave of his hand, dismissive yet weary. I have thought of that. They will search for him, and they will find nothing. He will never be heard of again. He has his private means, his hiding places. But I am done. Jekyll's this came this morning. Seksk Uttersinsk reading aloud, slowly, his voice laced with apprehension. My dear Jekyll, I am safe, I am going, and I am done with you. I mean from henceforth to lead a new life, and to pay back the past. Let our ways be separate, and my word is my bond. Your obedient, humble servant, E. Hyde. Uttersinsk, pay back the past. What does he mean by that? Stristich, his gaze fixed on the letter, as if it holds some terrible secret. He refers to money, Utterson. To my benefactions. He wishes to repay me for what I have given him, which, as you may imagine, is considerable. He had a singular claim upon me, one which I can now reveal no more. But it is true, he had grown to detest me as much as I him. Ashchiksk Uttersinsk, his mind racing, connecting dots he'd rather leave unconnected, and this letter you are sure it is from him. Jekyll nodding emphatically, almost pleadingly, absolutely. It was delivered by hand, and Poole saw the boy who delivered it. No, there is no mistake. This is Hyde's farewell, and a heavy relief it is, for all the horror it carries. Axt Uttersesk hesitantly. Henry, you understand that this less utter is evidence. The police. Jekyll's cutting him off, a flash of urgency in his haunted eyes. No! Not the police, Utterson! Never the police! This must be kept secret. It would ruin me. Utterson, you are my oldest friend, my only confidant. You must advise me. I put my honor in your hands. What should I do with this accursed thing? Strict Uttersense sighing heavily. Very well, Henry. I will take it. I will consider the matter. For your sake. Strict Uttersense to himself, pacing a singular claim upon me. He grew to detest me. This does not sound like a mere benefactor and recipient. It sounds deeper, more intertwined. Strict Uttersense muttering, oh, no. They are utterly different. One a careful, scholarly script, the other a barbarous scrawl. Guest, good evening, Mr. Utterson. Are you quite finished with these documents for tomorrow's docket? Strext Uttersesk looking up, a sudden thought striking him. Ah, guest, a moment, if you please. You have, I believe, a particular aptitude for discerning matters of penmanship. Strext guest, a slight, knowing smile. I have, sir, spent many years poring over such things. Indeed, it is a fascination. Shix Uttersinsk pushing the two letters forward. Then pray, cast your eye over these two. This one, a note from my good friend Dr. Jekyll. And this, a communication I received this morning, from a person named Hyde. Tell me what you observe. Asterisk guest, after a long moment, slowly, thoughtfully Most interesting, sir. Most interesting indeed. Shki Utterson Strix leaning forward, his heart thumping with anticipation and dread. And what is it you find interesting, guest? Sixth guest, tapping a finger on Hyde's letter, then on Jekyll's invitation. At first glance, one would say they were as different as night and day. One so cultivated, the other so crude. Yet there is a profound similarity in their overall design, sir. A distinct, underlying rhythm, if you will, as if the hand that wrote this, she's guest was attempting to disguise itself. A rather clumsy effort, too, for a truly practiced forger. But what truly catches my eye, Mr. Utterson, is this: the slope of the letters. Dr. Jekyll's hand slopes forwards, to the right, with a natural elegance. This other hand it slopes backward, to the left, with an unnatural aggression. Asked guests, indeed, sir. They are, in my humble opinion, the same hand, writ in different directions. Tresk Uttersonsk staring at the two letters, his face pale, his voice a barely audible whisper. The same hand. The air hung heavy with a silence not of peace, but of a monstrous expectation. Mr. Utterson, his customary measured stride a trifle less assured, found himself once more at the familiar, yet now subtly alien, door of Dr. Jekyll's residence. The news of Sir Danvers' Care's brutal murder had cast a long, chilling shadow over London, and every man of sense knew the trail led straight to the depraved figure of Mr. Hyde. Utterson's heart, though accustomed to the grim realities of legal practice, beat with a new, unsettling rhythm for his old friend. He was admitted by Poole, whose face, usually a mask of professional decorum, was now etched with a profound weariness, a mute testament to the household's suffering. The library, typically a sanctuary of scholarly calm, felt suffocating. Dr. Jekyll sat by the fire, a figure of profound desolation. His face, ghastly pale, bore the ravages of some deep internal struggle, yet his eyes, though red-rimmed and distant, held a flicker of a strange, desperate resolve. Jekyll, Utterson began, his voice surprisingly gentle, "This is a terrible business." The doctor merely nodded, a barely perceptible movement. "I am done with him, Utterson," he rasped, his voice thin, almost spectral. "I swear to God I am done with him forever." There was an earnestness, a desperate conviction in Jekyll's tone that pierced through Utterson's fog of apprehension. He wanted to believe it fiercely. The lawyer settled into a chair opposite, his gaze fixed on his friend. "You have heard the news, then? The police are looking for Hyde." "I have heard," Jekyll said, pressing a trembling hand to his forehead. "And I have suffered, Utterson. Suffered unspeakably. But he is safe, I tell you. He will trouble me no more. I shall never set eyes on him again." Utterson felt a knot loosen in his chest. "That is good, Jekyll. But the police, they want to know the motive, the relationship. You sheltered him." A flicker of something, fear, indignation, crossed Jekyll's features. "My good name, Utterson, that is all I have left. I would not for the world have my reputation sullied by this wretch." He paused, then, with a renewed air of urgency, reached into his pocket and produced a folded letter. "See here. This arrived this morning. It settles everything." Utterson took the letter, his brow furrowed. It was dated that very day, and the handwriting, though somewhat cramped and spidery, was clearly that of Edward Hyde. The contents were brief. Almost insolent, it informed Jekyll that he need not worry, that Hyde was quite safe, and would ensure Jekyll's good name was preserved by his perpetual absence. It even contained a perfunctory apology for the trouble caused. "He means to escape," Utterson mused, turning the paper over in his hand. "This is a relief, Jekyll, truly. But you must understand, I cannot simply keep this from the authorities if they question me directly. This is evidence." Jekyll's eyes widened, a frantic terror now replacing his earlier despondency. "No, Utterson, you must not. My God, think of the scandal. My name, my very life, hangs by a thread. I trust you, my old friend. This letter proves he is gone. Let it suffice." There was an unspoken plea, a desperate reliance in Jekyll's gaze that Utterson found hard to resist. He was, above all, a loyal friend. He felt a profound pity for the man before him, ravaged by some unseen torment. He tucked the letter into his own pocket. "Very well, Jekyll, I shall see what can be done. But if asked directly, I must tell the truth." He rose to leave, a profound unease still gnawing at him despite Jekyll's assurances. As he reached the door, Jekyll called out, you do not think I was an accomplice." His voice was a bare whisper heavy with dread. Utterson turned, his expression grave. "No, Jekyll. I believe you were a dupe, but a loyal one, perhaps too loyal." He left the house, the silence of the street a stark contrast to the tumult in his mind. The walk back to his own chambers felt interminable. The letter from Hyde felt like a lead weight in his pocket, heavy with unspoken questions. If Hyde had truly fled, how had this letter been delivered so swiftly, so discreetly, directly into Jekyll's hands? No postal mark, no messenger. A flicker of suspicion, cold and sharp, ignited within him. Back in his office, the fire cast dancing shadows across the familiar legal tomes. Utterson rang for Poole. "Poole," he began, trying to sound casual, "when Dr. Jekyll received this morning's letter, was it delivered by hand, or by the postman?" Poole, ever precise, considered for a moment. "By hand, sir? No, sir. I saw no messenger today, save for the tradesman. And the postman, he called as usual, but there was no letter for the doctor, not that I received." Utterson's blood ran cold. No messenger, no postman. Yet Jekyll had claimed it arrived this morning, a deliberate fabrication. The implication struck him like a physical blow. Jekyll had lied. But why? To protect Hyde, or to protect himself from the deeper truth. His mind wrestled with the horrifying possibilities. The image of Jekyll's ravaged face, his desperate pleas for the preservation of his good name, now twisted into something sinister. He remembered the vague details of Jekyll's will, leaving everything to Hyde. A dark, dreadful connection was beginning to form, threads of deception weaving into a suffocating net. He spent the evening alone, the letter from Hyde spread on his desk, his gaze returning to it again and again. The handwriting, though peculiar, felt vaguely familiar. He summoned his head clerk, Mr. Guest, a man known for his keen eye and quiet diligence, and not incidentally, a connoisseur of handwriting. Guest, Utterson began, pushing the letter across the desk. I need your opinion on this. A matter of some delicacy. Could you tell me if this handwriting is genuine? Guest, a small, unobtrusive man with spectacles perched on his nose, took the letter with deference. He studied it for a long moment, his lips moving silently as if tracing the characters. An unusual hand, sir, he murmured, rather bold, yet with a certain affectation. The loops, the pressure. Utterson watched him intently, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He then remembered a dinner invitation he had received from Jekyll, lying on a nearby side table. Ah, Guest, while you're at it, compare it with this, if you would. He handed over Jekyll's elegant, flowing script. Guest took the second paper, holding both under the light. His initial calm gave way to a subtle shift in expression, a slight widening of his eyes behind the spectacles. He moved the papers closer, then further apart, tilting his head. Most interesting, sir, Guest finally said, his voice hushed, tinged with a professional wonder that was, to Utterson, deeply unsettling. There's a curious resemblance. The general character, the underlying structure, they are not identical, no, but it's as if one were written by the right hand and the other by the left. Or perhaps he paused, his gaze fixed, as if one hand had consciously altered its customary slope and style to disguise itself. Remarkable, truly. Almost the same hand, sir, only differently sloped. The words hung in the quiet room like a death knell. Practically identical. Utterson felt a cold sweat prickle his skin. He dismissed Guest, who left with a respectful nod, unaware of the abyss he had just opened beneath his employer's feet. Utterson sat alone again, the two letters side by side. Hyde's brutal, jagged script, Jekyll's refined, cultured hand. And now, Guest's chilling observation, only differently sloped. The horror of the truth, naked and stark, finally descended upon him. It wasn't that Jekyll was protecting Hyde. It wasn't even that Jekyll was merely an accomplice. The truth was far more monstrous, far more unthinkable. Jekyll was Hyde. Or, more precisely, Jekyll had written the letter as Hyde, forging the hand of the very fiend he claimed to abhor and fear. His mind reeled. The man he had known, respected, and defended, a man of science and good standing, was capable of such a grotesque deception, such a calculated lie. The genial doctor, Jekyll, and the murderous Mr. Hyde were not two separate entities in a simple master-servant dynamic, but intimately, hideously connected. The letter was not a message from a fleeing criminal. It was a desperate self-serving fabrication by Jekyll himself. The implications were catastrophic. Jekyll, the friend he had just pitied, was a deceiver, perhaps a murderer, certainly a profound liar. The carefully constructed world of logic and reason that Utterson inhabited began to crack, revealing an abyss of moral depravity and psychological torment. The horror was not just the crime, but the corruption of the human soul, the duplicity of a man he had called friend. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the secrets he had uncovered were only the first tremors of a far greater, more terrifying revelation to come. The thought was a leaden weight in his soul, and he sat there, consumed by a dread that no legal precedent could address, no rational argument unravel. The truth, in its ghastly simplicity, was an unbearable burden. The parchment, yellowed and fragile beneath my trembling hand, feels a macabre confidante. I write this, Utterson, not as a man of science addressing a learned society, but as a soul stripped bare, uttering its last desperate truth to a world that will surely judge and condemn. This, then, is my confession, the unraveling of Henry Jekyll, the dissection of a man divided. For years, I harbored a secret conviction, a philosophical torment that man is not truly one, but two. I saw it in myself, this profound duality, the benevolent physician, striving for goodness, yet shadowed by an urgent, almost savage inclination towards pleasure, towards sin. It was a war within my breast, a constant, wearying struggle. My reputation, my good name, my very sanity, all hinged on the suppression of this darker, more primitive self. Oh, the arrogance of it, to dream of separating these two warring elements, to distill the good from the evil, to allow each its own unfettered existence, free from the constraints of the other. It was a notion born of both lofty idealism and ignoble cowardice. I yearned to shed the burdens of my virtuous facade, to plunge into forbidden delights without tainting the esteemed Dr. Jekyll. And so, the experiments began. The formula was intricate, a dance of chemical reagents, each with its peculiar, potent spirit. The night I finally completed it, the very air in my laboratory seemed to crackle with forbidden energy. I stood before the glass, containing that turbid red draft, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. A moment of hesitation, a flicker of fear, but the temptation, the scientific curiosity, the promise of liberation, was far too great. I drank. The agony was instantaneous, a searing, grinding torture that ripped through every fiber of my being. My bones seemed to crack, my flesh to melt, my very soul contorted in a paroxysm of unspeakable pain. I screamed, I think, though the sound was swallowed by the roaring tempest within me. And then, as suddenly as it began, it ceased. A profound lightness, a boundless sense of freedom, flooded my senses. I looked down. My clothes, which had been 2 large moments before, now hung ridiculously on a form that was smaller, younger, imbued with a strange, primal energy. I found myself in the full flush of a new, exhilarating wickedness. This creature, this Edward Hyde, was pure impulse, unburdened by conscience or remorse. A surge of joy, terrifying in its intensity, coursed through me. For the first time, I knew perfect freedom. That first night, I indulged in harmless mischief, a child delighting in forbidden candy. I returned to my own form, invigorated, convinced I had found the ultimate key to human nature, a controllable outlet for my darker urges. I built Hyde a separate life, a separate dwelling, a separate account. He was my secret theater, my anonymous confidant, my release valve. I believed I held him on a leash, a dangerous but domesticated beast. What folly, what monstrous self-deception! The beast was not domesticated, it was merely biding its time. Slowly, insidiously, Hyde began to assert himself. The transformations grew easier for him, more difficult for me. The initial thrill of freedom curdled into a growing apprehension as his exploits escalated from mischief to malevolence, from selfishness to outright cruelty. I tried to curb him, to lock him away, but the very act of suppression only seemed to strengthen his hold. Then came the horror, the irreversible descent. I began to wake up as Hyde, without the aid of the potion. The boundaries between us blurred, then shattered. I, Henry Jekyll, would fall asleep in my bed, only to awaken in the squalid room of Hyde, my mind reeling from the black deeds committed in that other form, my hands stained with guilt I could not recall committing, only feeling the chilling echo of their depravity. The murder of Sir Danvers Care was the shattering blow, the moment I finally grasped the full, monstrous extent of my error. That was not a separate entity, that was ***. Hyde was not a foreign spirit possessing me, he was the raw, unrestrained essence of Henry Jekyll, stripped of all cultivation, all morality. I had not separated good from evil, I had merely given my evil twin the freedom to grow, to dominate, to utterly consume me. Now, the potion that once brought me back to Jekyll is failing. The doses grow weaker. The time I can inhabit my own body shrinks daily. Soon, I will be Hyde permanently. The thought is a torment beyond description. I am a prisoner in my own creation, a man haunted by the monster he himself unleashed. This is the ultimate division, not 2 men, but 1 man tearing himself apart. I am the victim of my own pride, my own scientific hubris, my own desperate desire to escape the inherent duality of human nature. I write this as a final act of Jekyll, a desperate plea for understanding, perhaps even forgiveness, before the last vestiges of my good self are extinguished, and only the fiend remains. My end is near, and with it, the dreadful truth of a man who sought to divide his soul, only to lose it entirely. Welcome, dear traveler, to the 7th and final leg of our journey together. A pilgrimage not through ancient lands, but into the very heart of the human spirit. For too long, the tale of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde has been a warning, a chilling Gothic mirror reflecting the dangers of division. But what if, I propose, we cease to merely fear this reflection, and instead learn to dance with it? What if we could, with courage and grace, integrate the very parts of ourselves we've long sought to exile? This chapter, my friends, is not merely a lecture, but a 7-day expedition, a conscious undertaking to embrace what Dr. Jekyll so tragically failed to understand, that the darkness within is not a monster to be caged, but a misunderstood aspect of our own intricate being, yearning for a place in the light. No potent drafts, no secret laboratories, only the quiet, unwavering resolve of self-discovery. Askik Day 1, acknowledging the whisper, the first glare in the mirror. Ask, our journey begins, as all profound quests must, with awareness. Think of Dr. Jekyll in his cabinet, meticulously preparing his potion. He believed he was separating, purifying. But what he truly did was amplify an ignored voice, a denied impulse. Your task today is simpler, yet infinitely more powerful: to listen. For just one day, become an observer of your inner landscape. Notice the sharp retort you bite back, the flicker of envy, the surge of impatience, the sudden, unbidden urge to say or do something contrary to your good self. Don't judge it, don't suppress it. Simply acknowledge it. Like a curious child observing a strange new creature in the garden, simply *C* it. Where does this whisper come from? What situations trigger it? This is not about condemnation, but about gathering data, about gently opening the door to the hidden rooms of your own mind. It's the first, most crucial step away from Jekyll's self-deception. Day 2. Mapping the shadow, charting the unseen territory. With yesterday's observations fresh in your mind, let us delve a little deeper. Dr. Jekyll's Hyde was a caricature of evil, but our shadows are far more nuanced. They are often unexpressed desires, disowned emotions, or rejected traits we deem unacceptable by society or ourselves. Today, I ask you to take up your pen, or simply find a quiet space for contemplation. Think of the things you judge most harshly in others. Is it arrogance, weakness, recklessness, selfishness? Often these are precisely the qualities we have exiled within ourselves. Consider also the times you felt a powerful, disproportionate reaction to a situation, a sudden burst of anger, an overwhelming sense of inadequacy, an inexplicable attraction to something forbidden. These strong emotional signals are often signposts to your shadow. What patterns emerge? What common themes? This is about drawing a rudimentary map of your internal Hyde, not to vilify him, but to understand his terrain. Day 3. The story of our scars, understanding the origins. Every shadow has a story, a history rooted in our past. Why did Jekyll create Hyde? Because he felt shackled by societal expectations, unable to express his gayer impulses. His shadow was born from repression. Today, reflect on your own life. When did you first learn that certain emotions or traits were bad or unacceptable? Was it a scolding from a parent, a taunt from a peer, a cultural message? Perhaps you were told boys don't cry or girls shouldn't be angry. Perhaps your creativity was dismissed or your ambition criticized. These early experiences often lead us to disown parts of ourselves, pushing them into the shadow where they fester and grow powerful, much like Hyde growing more dominant with each transgression. Understanding why these parts were exiled helps us to approach them with compassion rather than fear. Day 4. Befriending the unbeautified, reclaiming rejected strengths. This is where our journey takes a transformative turn. We often assume our shadow is purely negative, but it is often a repository of raw, unchanneled power. Jekyll saw Hyde as pure evil, but Hyde also possessed a fierce will, an unbridled passion, a freedom from societal constraints, qualities Jekyll himself admired in secret, yet deemed too dangerous for his conscious self. Today, consider the shadow traits you've identified. Can you reframe them? Could that stubbornness be perseverance? Could anger be passionate conviction or a healthy boundary-setting force? Could selfishness be a necessary self-care or assertion of needs? Your shadow isn't just weaknesses, it's unrefined gold. How might you integrate these aspects constructively, giving them healthy avenues for expression, rather than letting them erupt explosively like Hyde on the streets of London? Day 5. Dialogue with the other, the first steps of integration. Now, with a clearer understanding and a newfound compassion, let us attempt a gentle dialogue. This isn't about giving your shadow free rein, but about listening to its needs and finding a place for it within your conscious self. Imagine sitting across from your internal Hyde, not as an adversary, but as a misunderstood part of your whole. What does it want? What does it need to express? Perhaps it's a need for playfulness, for spontaneity, for authentic expression, for a healthy assertion of boundaries. How can you consciously, safely, and constructively allow these needs to be met? This might involve setting aside time for creative pursuits, expressing a difficult truth with kindness, pursuing a long-forgotten passion, or simply allowing yourself moments of unrestrained joy or healthy sadness. The goal is to build a bridge, to bring these exiled energies back into the fold, rather than letting them erupt in destructive ways. Day 6. Conscious embodiment, practicing wholeness. You are no longer Jekyll, attempting a dangerous separation. You are the architect of your own wholeness. Today, practice consciously embodying your integrated self. When a shadow impulse arises, instead of pushing it away or letting it overwhelm you, pause. Acknowledge it. There's my desire for recognition. Understand its root. I'm feeling a need to be seen. and then consciously choose a constructive response. I will express my ideas clearly in the meeting, or I will celebrate my small victories today. This is about exercising conscious choice, not automatic reaction. It's about being aware of the full spectrum of your being, your light and your shadow, and making deliberate decisions that honor both. It is a dance of acceptance and mindful action, preventing the unconscious eruption that doomed Jekyll. Ashk's Day 7. The ongoing journey sustaining the inner alliance. Ashk integration is not a destination, but a continuous journey. Jekyll believed he could solve his problem with one magical act. We know now it's a lifelong process of awareness, acceptance, and gentle redirection. Today, reflect on the shifts you've noticed this week. How does it feel to acknowledge more of yourself? What new insights have emerged? Commit to continuing this practice, the daily observation, the compassionate inquiry, the conscious choice to integrate. Understand that setbacks will occur, old patterns will resurface. This is normal. The goal is not perfection, but persistent, loving engagement with your entire self. Every time you consciously choose integration over repression, you are strengthening the alliance within, building resilience, and preventing the tragic division that consumed Dr. Jekyll. My friends, the story of Jekyll and Hyde is a powerful cautionary tale, but it need not be our own. By daring to look within, to understand our shadows not as monsters but as misunderstood aspects of our being, we unlock a profound source of energy, creativity, and authenticity. We become not just good but whole. And in that wholeness, there is a true, enduring power. Go forth, then, and dance with your shadows, for they too are part of your magnificent, strange, and utterly unique human story. Good evening, my friends. Draw near, and let us speak of shadows. Not merely the shadows cast by gaslight on London's fog-laden streets, but the deeper, more ancient shadows that cling to the very architecture of the human soul. For we have journeyed through the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a tale that coils about us not just as a thrilling mystery, but as a chilling, inescapable mirror. And now, as the final pages turn and Jekyll's confession lies bare, three profound truths, like ancient, unyielding pillars, emerge from the wreckage of his shattered life. They are truths about us, about the heart that beats within every man and woman, truths as old as time itself, and as fresh as the deepest secret you hold within your own breast. The first truth, the most glaring, the most terrifying, is this: human nature is a crucible of inherent duality. Dr. Jekyll, a man of profound intellect and esteemed reputation, believed, as many of us do, that he was two distinct beings. One, the upright, charitable, brilliant physician. The other, a tempest of suppressed appetites, a whisper of desire for forbidden liberties that respectable society, and Jekyll himself, deemed monstrous. He saw as good and evil as separate entities, wrestling within him, and in a hubris born of scientific curiosity and personal torment, he sought to tear them asunder. He concocted a draft, a chemical key to unlock the darker self, to give it form and freedom, believing he could then simply lock it away again. But what his experiment unveiled was not two separate beings, but two inextricably linked facets of the same soul. Hyde was not an alien intruder, but Jekyll's own darker half, distilled and given liberty. He was the shadow, yes, but a shadow cast by Jekyll's own light. The very act of separating them proved their fundamental unity, for one could not exist without the other, and the attempt to divide them only intensified the war within. We, too, live with this duality: the face we present to the world, and the unbidden thoughts, the selfish impulses, the silent judgments that flit through the mind. Jekyll teaches us that to deny one aspect is to empower it, to make it monstrous. This leads us, inexorably, to the second truth: evil, once indulged, grows with a horrifying, insatiable hunger, eroding the very foundations of the self. When Hyde first emerged, he was small, deformed, but exhilarating. Jekyll, through Hyde, tasted freedom from conscience, from social constraint. He found a savage joy in Hyde's transgressions, a liberating absence of guilt. It began with minor debaucheries, harmless caprices, a walk on the wild side, as it were. But the pleasure of sin is a poison chalice. Each indulgence strengthened Hyde, making him bolder, crueler, more dominant. The initial control Jekyll exercised began to wane, then to fray, and finally to snap. From a carefully planned escape, Hyde became an involuntary manifestation, a terrifying usurpation. The murder of Sir Danvers Care was not an isolated act of villainy, but the natural, horrific crescendo of unchecked indulgence. Each time Jekyll chose to become Hyde, he surrendered a piece of himself, not just to the monster, but asterisk to the monstrous nature itself asterisk. The path from a slight indiscretion to utter depravity is a gradual, almost imperceptible descent, each step making the next easier, until the return journey becomes impossible, and the abyss stares back. It reminds us that our choices, however small, are never truly isolated. They are bricks in the wall of our character, and a single crack can lead to ruin. And finally, the third truth, perhaps the most poignant, is this: the suppression of one's full nature, particularly the darker aspects, does not lead to purity, but to a dangerous, explosive hypocrisy. Jekyll, in his desperate attempt to maintain his impeccable public image, to be all good, repressed his natural human impulses with an iron will. He locked away his desires for pleasure, for freedom from the burden of conscience, seeing them as stains upon his soul. But what we deny does not disappear. It festers in the shadows, growing stronger in its confinement, until it demands an outlet. Hyde was the physical manifestation of all that Jekyll had so rigorously suppressed. By refusing to acknowledge and integrate his shadow self, Jekyll instead created an autonomous entity that eventually devoured him. He became a prisoner of his own creation, trapped between a respectable life he no longer truly embodied and a monstrous life he could no longer control. His attempt to achieve moral perfection through compartmentalization led to the ultimate moral catastrophe. The story whispers a timeless warning: true self-knowledge and integrity come not from denying our imperfections, but from acknowledging them, understanding them, and striving to integrate them into a complete, albeit flawed, human being. To pretend we are solely light is to invite the darkness to rise unbidden and consume us whole. So, there you have them, these three stark truths etched into the very fabric of Jekyll's tragedy. His strange case is not just a Victorian thriller, it is a profound philosophical treatise, a mirror held up to every one of us. It urges us to look inwards, to examine the duality within, to be wary of the siren call of indulgence, and to embrace the wholeness of our imperfect, magnificent, and often terrifying human nature. For in understanding Jekyll's downfall, perhaps we find a path, however dimly lit, towards a more integrated, honest, and ultimately, safer existence within the labyrinth of our own souls. The shadows, my friends, are always there. The question is, how do we choose to live with them? We all have our secret gardens, don't we? Places where impulses bloom unchecked, far from the critical gaze of others. And in those hidden corners, where the shadows grow long and the air is thick with unspoken desires, we sometimes find ourselves wrestling with an unseen adversary, or perhaps a reflection we scarcely recognize. It's a primal conflict, ancient as humanity itself, the yearning for unfettered freedom, battling the inherent demands of conscience and the carefully constructed walls of reputation. Robert Louis Stevenson, with his keen Victorian eye for the human soul's labyrinthine passages, dared to draw these hidden conflicts into the harsh glare of London gaslight. He didn't just tell a story, he held up a mirror, not to the world, but to the self. The strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a chilling chronicle of one man's desperate attempt to compartmentalize his nature, to wall off his baser instincts in a separate, monstrous entity. But the walls, as we discover, were never strong enough. They crumbled, revealing the terrifying truth: the monster was not merely a creation, but an integral, inseparable part of the man. Jekyll's tragedy wasn't solely the consequence of his scientific hubris. It was equally the consequence of his profound isolation. He sought to manage his dark side in silence, cloistered in his laboratory, believing he could control the beast alone. He built walls, not bridges. He suppressed, rather than integrated. He chose secrecy over shared understanding, and in that lonely choice lay his undoing. His struggle remained a solitary burden, festering in the dark, until it consumed him entirely. He had no one to confess to, no one to debate with, no one to help him navigate the treacherous waters of his fractured soul. He was, in essence, trapped in a conversation with only himself, and his darkest self, at that. And that, dear reader, is precisely where our story takes a different turn. The tale of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is not meant to be read in silence, then quietly shelved. It is a catalyst, a potent elixir designed to provoke, to challenge, and most importantly, to ignite a conversation. Its themes: the duality of human nature, the masks we wear, the allure of forbidden desires, the fragile line between scientific ambition and ethical decay, the suffocating grip of societal expectation, and the terrifying consequences of unchecked impulse, are not historical artifacts. They are alive, pulsating in the very fabric of our modern world, in our individual struggles, and in our collective dilemmas. So, consider this your invitation, your call to action. Join the conversation. What does it mean to join this conversation? It means, first and foremost, turning the mirror back on yourself. Where do you see shades of Jekyll and Hyde in your own carefully constructed persona? What impulses do you keep locked away? How do you reconcile the public face you present to the world with the private self that operates in the shadows? This isn't about judgment, it's about understanding, about acknowledging the complex, often contradictory tapestry of being human. Then, extend that introspection outward. Find someone who has also felt the chill of that final testament, who has wrestled with the implications of Jekyll's descent. Share your insights. Debate the ethics. Ponder the psychological depths. Was Jekyll truly evil, or merely tragically flawed? Was Hyde an external entity, or the raw, unadulterated essence of Jekyll himself? How do these questions resonate with the moral quandaries of our own age, from the ethical implications of emerging technologies to the hidden costs of our collective pursuit of convenience and pleasure? Revisit the subtle clues Stevenson wove into his narrative, the atmospheric dread, the legalistic precision that gives way to horrifying personal confession. What did you miss on your first reading? How does your understanding of Lanyon's incredulity or Utterson's dogged pursuit deepen with each re-engagement? The text itself is a rich landscape for exploration, offering new pathways for discussion with every reading. But the conversation extends beyond your personal reflections and immediate circles. Seek out the vibrant online communities dedicated to classic literature, the scholarly articles that dissect Stevenson's genius, the passionate book clubs that meet in quiet corners of libraries or bustling cafes. Engage in these broader dialogues. Share your perspectives, listen to others, allow your understanding to be challenged and enriched. This shared exploration is vital, for it is through collective thought that we illuminate the darkest corners of human experience and find common ground in our shared humanity. Stevenson's masterpiece warns us of the dangers of isolation, of the peril of attempting to manage our inner demons in secret. The antidote, then, is connection. It is dialogue. It is the brave act of bringing our most challenging thoughts and questions into the light, allowing them to be examined, discussed, and understood collectively. This is not merely an academic exercise, it is an act of profound self-discovery and communal enlightenment. By joining this enduring conversation, you honor the timeless power of Stevenson's work and contribute your unique voice to an ongoing exploration of what it means to be human, to grapple with our own duplicity, and to seek integration rather than fragmentation. The story continues, not just on the page, but in the echoes of your own thoughts, and in the shared voices of all who dare to look into the mirror Stevenson so unflinchingly held up to us. Your voice matters. Your perspective adds a new facet to the prism through which we view this strange, compelling case. Let the conversation begin.